if you simply took those skills, so the same skills that I'm acknowledging are somewhat a combination of consistency, hard work, dedication, being a little bit cringe, aka being uncomfortable, but also recognizing there is some level of innate ability inside of it. If you took that same thought process and that same approach to achieving your fitness goals, to achieving your fat loss goals, to prioritizing your health, guess what? It would start to feel easier.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey, FYX listeners, welcome back to our latest and final episode for 2024 of the FYX Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and we're finishing out the year, you guys, just a solo, me and you, sitting down, or you walking while you're listening to me between your ears. And we have officially reached not only the end of 2024, but the FYX Podcast actually started in December of 2020. So this also marks 4 years of podcasting. Super proud of that. Very grateful for all of you who continue to tune in. If you're a brand new listener and you're finding this episode and the show rather for the very first time, I'm so excited you're here. You're landing in our world at a perfect time, because we're going to do a little reflecting on 2024 so that we can set you up for your best 2025 yet, your best year yet. Now, when I started this podcast back in 2020, I had a bunch of different ideas for the direction that it would go in. And I have to say, the past year, I'd say really a year and a half, if not 2, but the past year especially, I feel like I've really found more of my groove and my voice with doing solo episodes. And I can see, just going based off of the numbers, because we love looking at data when it comes to nutrition. Same goes for business, same goes for podcast listens. I can tell that you guys really like the solo episodes too, based on the number of listens that I get relative to interviews. Sometimes it just depends on the guest, the topic that we're discussing. I love my guests. I really enjoy doing interviews for these podcasts, but I actually have to admit that when I first started doing solo episodes, I was really uncomfortable with them. I felt like I had to rehearse everything I would say, script it out a little bit more, have a ton of notes. And I've now gotten to a point where I can just honestly just turn on the camera, set up my mic, set up my recording, and just kind of rip. And I'm proud of myself to have built the skill to do that. And I know I've said this in other episodes, using podcasting itself as an example around consistency and tying that back as an analogy to achieving your fitness and nutrition goals. For anything to actually feel arguably easy, however you define that term, or maybe even simple, doing it, getting your reps in is a massive part of having that shift in relating to something in a way where you feel like it comes to you naturally, where you feel like it's something that you're simply just able to do without as much thought. Maybe you're on autopilot to a degree. Now, I'm definitely not on autopilot doing a podcast episode. I do like to gather my thoughts and think about the different things I want to say. I know a lot of you out there love a nice little list of different things you can focus on, different steps you can take to be able to lose those next 10 pounds, or reprioritize your relationship with food, or feel like you can get your energy levels back up to where they used to be. But as I've really taken the time to step back and reflect, as so many of us do at the end of the year, I have almost surprised myself in a way by how much I like solo episodes. And that has everything to do with the fact that when I first started this podcast, I was really channeling that inner Krysta, who at 16 years old desired to be a journalist. And I really thought that podcasting would be a way for me to tap back into so many of those skills. And naturally, when I'm interviewing somebody, it totally is. But I never really thought about the monologue piece of it, because something that's very unique to podcasting versus comparing journalism and storytelling in that regard, podcasting, yes, is storytelling. But when it comes to journalism and articles and things we see on the news. And I know the news itself has changed so much in the last 4, 8, and 10 plus years. So different than what it was even when I was the aspiring 16-year-old, hoping to be a journalist, hoping to be on TV, hoping to have bylines one day. Is that you as the journalist or the writer or the producer of that story, you yourself are never the story. Obviously, when it comes to podcasting, the host can often be the story. When it comes to a solo episode, of course, the host is the story. And I think as I reflect on it, that for a while was a little bit uncomfortable for me because I really had traditional values around being fair, learning about bias, learning about how to portray different sides, all of the principles that make for a really great article that I learned through high school, well into college and getting my degree. That has very much carried into the way I think about conducting interviews for this podcast. But if I were to go back and listen to early episodes, I'm sure that I would actually see that sometimes I talked a whole lot more than I intended to when I wanted to create space for the guest and maybe ask them too many questions at once, because that is a pattern I am aware of. Or I didn't necessarily weave my story back into what they were saying. And as I think about how I've honed my skills, as I've continued to develop them and get better at them, I really feel like these solo episodes have actually allowed me to think a little bit more about where I fit into some of these stories, but also just be more relatable to all of you, be more open with all of you. I want to send a huge gratitude and genuine thank you to every single person who messaged me about my last solo episode, opening up, talking about things in my personal life. And I can tell based on how many listens we got for that one. And just the fact that I got a lot more individual messages with people saying, hey, like I really liked this. And I appreciate you sharing these things. And also I'm thinking of you. Thank you guys. You're amazing. You're so awesome. And I really mean that when I say that. But that episode, the feedback that I got from it just reminded me why our stories are so important to tell, because you just don't know who it might impact. And that's something that I always understood in learning about the principles of journalism and learning about how to make a good story. But it was always like the stories of the people who were most affected by the topic at hand. And I just think it's really cool how I've kind of gone on this journey that I've been consistent with, that I've shown up and am now so close to hitting 200 episodes. You know, we're going to do a little celebration like we did when we hit 100. We'll do that for 200, but that won't be for a few more months into the new year. We're close though. So yeah, I just wanted to say that and just share how proud I am of myself for stepping outside of my comfort zone in a way that you, the listener, may not realize was a little bit beyond my comfort zone, but you don't know that because I've spent a lot of time practicing. And if you've been here from the very beginning, I'm sure you could go back and tell me, yes, I've seen this change in the way that you articulate yourself when you turn on the mic. But I will also say, and not saying this in a way like, oh, let me toot my own horn. I do recognize the fact that I have always been somebody who could articulate themselves well without a lot of filler words, despite the fact that I just said right before I started this whole new thought, but I noticed that I did. And I'm grateful for that. I think it's something that a lot of people really do practice, and it's not lost on me that for others, it is something that requires a lot of practice. And I think about the fact that I've had so many chances to practice it, from being involved in different extracurriculars when I was in middle school, high school, college, but then even in our monthly meetings that we have with our nutrition clients, our Fitness Fix clients know that once a month we get together and we talk about a topic that I notice is impacting the group as a whole, or maybe is something related to that I'm about to reveal to you in the rest of this episode. Ways that you can set up yourself for success going into 2025, thinking about your goals, thinking about your actions behind them. Not even 3 weeks ago, we did a whole conversation around how to handle, holiday foods, Thanksgiving and things like that. But every time I do those things, I get the chance to speak. And I also do spend a lot of time listening back to myself when I record certain content for Reels for Instagram. And I know that not everyone necessarily gets the opportunity to do those things. So it's been something that, while I don't necessarily recognize that I'm refining it on a daily basis, it is a skill that I'm working through on a daily basis. And again, That's so parallel to nutrition and fitness, because think about it. You have to eat. Right before I sat down to record this episode, I put a few stories up. So it'll be, a week prior to when this episode actually drops. But I put a few stories up. I had just recorded a reel where I was explaining that a lot of us go through phases where we get really busy with work, kids, other aspects of our lives. We find it difficult to prioritize our fitness and nutrition, and just asked everyone to consider the possibility of what it might be like if you flipped that and you said to yourself, how about I take my health and I take my nutrition and I take my fitness as seriously as I do my career? Because if you'd want to get promoted at work, you wouldn't just start a project and then stop it when things got hard or when something got in your way, right? You'd never keep your current role. You'd certainly not get promoted. And realistically, that would prevent you from continuing to build the life for yourself that you desire. So if you apply that same notion to your fitness and nutrition, it's even more important because you have to eat. If we want to sit here and like really split hairs, we can make the argument that you don't have to work. And of course, yes, you do, because if you want to make a living, if you want to have a roof over your head, obviously you need to make money to do that. And in our world, that is the way that you make money. But when we think about it from a just like pure biological survival mechanism, you have to eat to survive. Yet we don't treat it with the same importance, with the same level of prioritization that we do our careers, our businesses, certain relationships that we have. And I've been saying this for a long time, but as I move into 2025, I am fully committed to making this the point that I stand on hardcore. At the beginning of 2024, I would say end of 23, like right around this time last year, I had this realization. I was in San Diego for a retreat with my business coach, and we were just thinking about like, what do we want to focus on for 24, mapping things out for the year. And a theme that I kept coming back to as it relates to this audience, my current clients and future clients, and the type of people that I really see a need for support, share the same commonality that selfishness is a bad thing. And I had this slogan that I thought of that I've referenced in a few posts, but truthfully not all the time. Instead of thinking about you being selfish as a bad thing, think about it as putting yourself first. So going from selfless, where you're doing everything for everybody, you're some version of a people pleaser, to self first. And I am fully committed to continuing that mantra going into 2025 and well beyond. And that is what the Fitness Fix really stands for. And that's why I like using analogies like my own commitment to podcasting, like how each of us sees our jobs, our careers. For me, this is obviously a part of my career, to highlight to you that if you simply took those skills, so the same skills that I'm acknowledging are somewhat a combination of consistency, hard work, dedication, being a little bit cringe, AKA being uncomfortable, but also recognizing there is some level of innate ability inside of it. If you took that same thought process and that same approach to achieving your fitness goals, to achieving your fat loss goals, to prioritizing your health, guess what? It would start to feel easier. And I've never been a fan of saying, oh, fat loss is easy, because I don't think it's that cut and dry. But what I do think is an important distinction is that fat loss can be simple. And that's actually how it can be simple. But it also can feel easier. And I know it's like a difference of a word, but it's very, in my mind, at least the way I consider it, and having worked with so many people over the last 4 years, I do think there's a level of frustration that comes with fat loss when you feel stuck. But the reality is, the reason why you feel stuck is because of where it does or does not land among your list of to-dos, your list of priorities. So anytime you catch yourself feeling a little bit stuck as you move into January, and let's be real, a lot of people have a lot more momentum in January. So maybe this is something to even keep in your back pocket. Be like, oh, Krysta said this. By the time you get to February, because we know that's when people kind of lose steam a little bit with whatever goal they set for the first of the year. I want you to tell yourself that this feeling hard, this feeling difficult, this feeling of frustration, this feeling of stuckness is a choice that comes back to the fact that you are putting other things ahead of your fitness and nutrition. And if you can just remind yourself of how powerful you are by reminding yourself of all of the things you are really good at, the things that don't have anything to do with your fitness and nutrition, the career one being a big example. For those of you who are parents out there, that being another big example. I know those are things that drive you and motivate you. So all I'm asking you to do is to then transfer those skills and apply them to your fitness journey. That's why I love analogies so much. A lot of my friends in the space like to make jokes that I can think of any kind of topic and relate it back to nutrition. And earlier this year, I did a post about my dog having an accident where she did number 2 all over my apartment. And I use that as an analogy for how you think about your fat loss journey. And for as funny as it is, when I think about it, I know why my brain does that. And the reason why my brain does that is because I want it to feel easier for you to understand, but I also want it to be something that then empowers you because you're like, oh yeah, no shit. If I realize that this parallel exists and I have this certain behavior, this certain thought process, as it applies to my work, as it applies to my career, as it applies to my relationships, well, that means I already have all the answers. And if that means that I already have all the answers, then that's all it's going to take, plus the execution, for me to then see the results that I want to see with the scale, with a certain, outfit fitting me, with certain energy levels, with being excited about prioritizing my fitness routine, with waking up in the morning and confidently knowing and looking forward to exactly what I'm going to eat that day in order to get the results that I want. All of that is possible for you. And I really believe that when you start operating from this place of, it's already happened, it's already done, I already have these answers, it will happen for you so much faster because your mind is so strong and your ability to change your perception of the way that you see the world, it starts right here. It starts, for those of you who are not watching on camera, I'm pointing to my head. It starts with your brain, and your brain can be rewired. And so that it was a very big lead up to the exercise that I recently did with my clients. So I'm taking you guys behind the scenes. For those of you who are not inside of the Fitness Fix community, I thought, what better way to end the year than to give you all a taste of exactly what we do when we meet in a group setting. So twice a month, I host group calls. One of them is more of like an office hours for clients to opt into as they see fit to come and ask me questions. The other is as an entire community. So anybody who is currently enrolled in our one-to-one programs has access to this call that we host. And as I said earlier, I pick different topics to present on. And this one is a favorite of mine, so much so that I did it at the beginning of the year on January 2nd of 24. And I'm now doing it at the end of the year too, because I wanted everyone to reflect on where they were and where they're going. And why not do the same for you, the Fix listener? So I have a couple of questions. And when you hear these questions, if you're driving or you're doing something where you can't look at your phone, don't wait until later. Listen to this podcast when you know you're able to take some notes and jot a few things down. But you can also pull up the transcript. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Apple started a cool thing a couple months ago where it automatically creates the transcript from the episode. And you can even copy and paste it. So I want you to reflect on these questions, take your time with them. If you're listening to this episode the day that it drops, it's December 26th. We know this is that part in the year where we don't really know what day it is between the 26th and New Year's, aka I know you're probably doing some fun things. I know you're decompressing and unplugged from work, but I also know that means you have time for yourself. And I'm going to call you out and say that if you creating time for yourself or taking advantage of the time that you have for yourself right now looks like a whole lot of doom scrolling, if you're listening to this podcast, this is your chance to interrupt that pattern and do something that will 100% pour directly back into you. And I'm going to make it really easy for you because the questions I'm going to ask you are going to get you to think about your journey and the goals that you have in a slightly different way. And what I mean by that is, I don't want you to walk away from doing this exercise simply with having the blueprint of what to do. You will. It's going to help you identify action steps. But what it's really going to do is highlight for you the mindset, the energy, the identity that you have to be in order to get the results that you want. And when you can think about that energy, you can think about that mindset, you can think about that attitude as if it's already happened. Like I said, that's really kind of the secret sauce to getting the things that you want. So let's do it. All right. So when I set this up for my clients, some of these questions are obviously related to having already been inside of our program. And when you hear that, if you're somebody listening to this who has not worked with me one-on-one, first and foremost, I would love the opportunity to work with you. So maybe this year is the year that you do it. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But this can apply to anything that you've tried when it comes to prioritizing your health and wellness. So it doesn't have to specifically be the fitness fix. I want you to just think about the decisions that you've made for the last 11 and a half months as it relates to you taking care of your health and your nutrition, going to the gym, what you're eating, all of the above. So here's question number one. If I could 100% guarantee weight loss inside of the fitness fix. So this is what I mean. You can insert like, if I get 100% guarantee weight loss for you, like no matter what, no matter how you're trying to do it, if I could just 100% guarantee it, is there anything that you would be doing differently than what you're doing right now? So one more time. If I could 100% guarantee weight loss for you, is there anything you would do? So think about the actions differently than what you're doing right now. Next one. If you've already lost weight, whether you've kept it off or not, do you ever spend time thinking about regaining that weight? So if you have a history of having lost weight, do you ever spend time thinking about regaining it in the sense of like, do you worry about that? Or as a second question, have you in fact regained that weight? And where I'm going with that is I want you to kind of time audit how much energy you put into that. So if you hear that question and you're like, yikes, I spend like a lot of time worrying about my weight or just the thought of gaining it back, I want you to sit with that a little bit. And then ask yourself, have you in fact gained it back? And just be honest. It's not for judgment. It's just the reality. And as you sit with those big questions, those first 2, 3-ish big questions, I want you to start thinking about your beliefs. What feelings are coming up for you? What's happening as you're saying those things to yourself? And then ask yourself this question. Is that belief useful? Are the actions that I'm currently taking, are they useful? From there, here's the reframe, how to make it positive. What actions and beliefs are in fact more in alignment with how I want my life to be? And that reframe is the answer to exactly how you can lay out the best 2025 yet. As a little bonus, if you do this exercise, DM me, send me a message on Instagram at the Krysta Huber. I love to see your responses. I'd love to support you in any way that I can to help you make this happen, even if none of those responses have to do with fitness. It could be your whole life. And with that, Happy New Year. So excited for 2025. And I will see you guys in the new year.